You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions.
The chance meeting of CeeLo, Green, and Danger Mouse led to the creation of the group Gnarls Barkley, who exploded onto the charts with their massive hit Crazy. Surprisingly, the collaboration of these two well-known artists never produced another mainstream hit. Geekscape's own Katie Elsaesser joins us this week to talk about everything from comedy to spaghetti westerns, and if we remember when we lost our minds about this undeniable 2006 hit.
One hit is all you need to make the money guaranteed, and you can live off royalties forever.
And it makes me wonder, is it just a wonder, or is it one-hit thunder?
Hey Katie, welcome to One Hit Thunder. You're on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You chose Crazy by Gnarls Barkley, and the first thing I want to talk about with this song is a little fact that I learned today about this song is that it developed from a conversation between CeeLo and Danger Mouse about how people won't take an artist seriously unless they're insane. So they started jokingly discussing ways to make people think they were crazy. CeeLo used that as an inspiration for the lyrics, and then he recorded the vocals for this song in one take, which we'll get to.
What?
Yeah, right, yeah. But do you find, is there merit in that statement? Do people not take artists seriously unless they're insane? How do you feel about that?
It's an interesting question, and I do feel like that has been something that people have been given a pass on for so long. It almost felt like Elizabeth Gilbert gives this really great talk about how like we need to move away from the idea that like the genius or whatever that's inside of us is like a separate entity. We need to move away from that being like ourselves and make that something a little bit separate for like our mental health reasons. And I really agree with that, because I do feel like we have glorified sort of the tortured soul of like artistry in any capacity. And I think it's best that I do feel like there are some things that are moving away, especially in the comedy world. There's a big deal going on, especially right now where, crazy, insanely aggressive men are usually at the top, and they have not made way for many women. And I feel like that is starting to change in a lot of different areas of entertainment. And I'm hoping that that's, changing. But yeah, I do think that is the absolute case, is that people glorify craziness a little too much.
I would agree also that I think that I would not just say comedy, but I would, obviously I'm a wrestling fan, so that comes to mind as well. And I'm sure also in music and even in film, I think if you look at like the 80s and early 90s, there was this like celebration of alcoholism and drug abuse that definitely is not the norm. Like, I think that like now it's like we do want our entertainers to be like trying to be a more straight-laced, healthy meeting with a therapist person, as opposed to like
checking in life.
Yeah, like, oh, I can't see a therapist, that'll ruin my creativity streak. And it's like, no, that's
well. I think there is something to be said about like true artists who like tap into like some different level of like consciousness that can appear as something very crazy. Like there's a poet named Kay Tempest, and their fantastic. And they talk about how, like, you know, there's things that we don't see that like really bring, it's going to rhyme, that really brings about poetry. You know, like they talked about like stories of like brand new ancients. Like we have these different things, like these older stories that we kind of hold and revere in terms of like former artistry, and how current day artistry needs their own brand new ancients. Tapping into that level of like thought process and creativity, I can totally see how people can see that's crazy. You have to be on shrooms or some shit just to understand that level of understanding. But I think we are moving away from glorifying craziness. Or
I guess also there are different definitions of crazy. What
Yes.
What do you think of when someone says crazy? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
screaming white woman.
Okay, all right.
Just me?
Okay. Because I guess when I think of crazy, I think of, I hate to say this, but I think of like a schizophrenic person.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that I think of that, but I think that's kind of the common thought in some
Idea.
in one way or another. But crazy can mean a lot of different things. I think when it comes to artistic pursuits, be it music, be it acting, be it any sort of art, that crazy is a good thing when it means eccentric and creative and not a person in, you know, a polo shirt going to a 9-to-5. Nothing against that. I'm just saying that could be considered. People might think that I'm crazy. I live a weird life, not a like out of control
All
life.
of us.
Yeah, we all do, right? We all live these.
Yeah, pretty much anyone under the Geekscape label, I
Yeah.
think there's a little element
Yeah,
of
it's a little
crazy in our
crazy.
pursuits.
Yeah. You know, but I also think of the good crazy and bad crazy of like, okay, I could very easily see people saying like Joaquin Phoenix is crazy. Like his personality is crazy. And I don't know, in his roles and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good thing. I haven't heard about him doing anything too bad or
Untoward.
anything.
Yeah, he's a different crazy than, say, a different Joker actor like Jared Leto, who's like, you know, sending dead animals crazy because he's a quote-unquote method actor.
Right. Talking about like the changes of the time and like changes of perspective, like method acting is very looked down on now, which I personally agree, because I think we should be, you know, saving our artists from certain doom or non-mental health. I think everyone should be going to therapy or like exploring the deeper meaning behind their own thoughts and actions. It's fun. I never knew this about this song. This is a way deeper song than I ever would have imagined.
You know, I think about it in the world of music that I came up in, and you had these guys, be it Bert, who was the singer of The Used, or like Max from Say Anything, wild, crazy lyrics, or maybe a wild, crazy persona. And yeah, it was glorified. And those guys came through in the music, and whether that was sort of a show they put on or not, I don't know. I can't speak for that. It seemed pretty authentic with those particular people. We could think of 1,000. You know, most bands that were popular and interesting, there was to a certain extent. Kurt Cobain. Like, you know.
Well, I was going to say that the Max Bemis one's a great example, because Max Bemis makes me also think of Alanis Morissette in a weird way, of like, both of them had a slightly similar career issue where Alanis Morissette blew up as the angry woman, and Max Bemis blew up as like the dude who's like struggling with his mental health. And then once Alanis Morissette stopped being angry and Max Bemis started getting medicated and like living a healthy life, people also became less invested in their music, which is like upsetting. That shouldn't be the message. Like, those should be victory stories.
Yeah, true. You got a point. But if that's your thing, then you're kind of screwed, right?
That is the interesting thing, especially for artistry, is, gosh, I forget the comic, but he talked about how like he felt like he was so attached to his depression that if he had gone on medication, that it would change his comedy forever.
Right.
And how much his therapist was like, no, you should go just to have a better life. And he did. And he's like, my comedy's kind of the same. I make the same stuff, but I get to sleep at night, you know? Like I have a like better quality of life. And I think it's the same reason why it's like, well, you know, maybe some reality TV shows aren't something that we should continue showing because people will get invested.
Right.
We'll
sure.
get the internet. Look at it. We've got so many things that we can look at, but investing in like personal health, I feel like it shouldn't be attached to like, all right, so what med have I not gone on in order to accomplish this piece of art?
Yeah, people are entertained by it. And it's funny you bring that up because I just, in the past hour or two, had made a post about my girlfriend got me in. I say got me into. She puts it on and then I watch it, but 90 Day. This show.
90 Day Fiance?
Well, yes, but the 90 Day, The Single Life, featuring Big Ed and Natalie from past seasons. And it's just the worst human beings imaginable doing and saying the worst things. And we're watching it and we're entertained by it. You know,
right?
And
But like, what is it in us that finds that so fascinating? Is it the like comparison of other, or is it the like I would never do that, or is it the like interest in like destruction?
Well, you know, to bring this back to Gnarls Barkley and crazy a little bit, another thing. And Katie, I want to talk to you about this because I'm sure you and Matt know a lot more about this than I do. I don't know why I'm assuming that. Maybe you don't.
Maybe,
but. I have heard this term so many times, and it wasn't till today when I really dove into it that I understood what a spaghetti western was. And because the sample in this song is from a spaghetti western,
Makes
and
sense.
it's from, specifically the song is called Last Men Standing by Jean Piero Reverberi and Gianfranco Reverberi, and it's from the 1968 spaghetti western Django Prepare a Coffin, which is the unofficial prequel to the better-known Django. Crazy not only samples the song, but utilizes the parts of the main melody and chord structure. So the original songwriters, these Italian guys, are credited alongside Gnarls Barkley for this song.
Barkley, wow, with CeeLo Green and Duck Path.
Yeah.
That's insane. Okay, we're going to have to go back because I don't think I do know what a spaghetti western means.
Okay.
I can tag in on this.
Well, yeah, okay. Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, it's the short version is a spaghetti western. Is a western made in Italy.
Oh, what? Does that sound like the most American thing we could ever freaking do?
But it's
a meatball movie.
There's a very
Jesus.
specific look and vibe to them. A lot of the people who later went on to make giallo horror, which is like a very specific type of Italian horror film, got their start as directors of photography on these Western films. So like Italian films, specifically in the 70s, and I want to say even into the 80s, had these very vivid color palettes and were very atmospheric and very like drawn out slow burns. And they applied that aesthetic to a Western. So like a lot of early Clint Eastwood movies, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is technically a spaghetti Western. It was shot in Italy.
Oh,
but that's
in
like
that
a
style.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that 3-hour, really drawn out, but like when the violence happens, it's really in your face type violence instead of just like the 1950s. There's a guy on the roof and they shoot a gun and he just falls off the roof and that's the end of it. Like they'll show the explosion of someone getting hit with a bullet and like the very paint red blood exploding out of them and stuff like that.
There's something I learned that relates to this song a lot is that spaghetti westerns, as compared to the classic American westerns where there was a black and white good and evil, like it was very clear cut who was the good guy, who was the bad guy. Well, there was way more of a moral gray area. Like the protagonist may have not been that great of a person, which, you know, we're used to that now on every HBO show. If you watch Succession or The Sopranos or whatever, we're used to that. But at the time, that was kind of a newer type of thing. And the spaghetti westerns had a lot lower budgets than of our country.
The cheeseburger westerns, as we call them.
Whatever they are. But our westerns, the ones that inspired these, they had big budgets and they could hire like orchestras to do the score and stuff. But these low budget Italian ones, they didn't have as big of budgets. So they had scores where they replaced the orchestral sounds with things like whistles and, most importantly to our discussion today, electric guitar. So it was
Yeah.
very...
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it was very
Like,
twangy and verbed out and awesome.
Very minimalistic instrumentation on the scores.
And Katie, do you have a musical background? I don't know your background.
I played percussion in middle school band.
Okay.
And then that's pretty much the extent of it. I was in many musicals, to which a director told me I had 2 left feet and couldn't sing.
Okay. All right. Well,
But those are my experiences.
I ask that because I didn't want to talk down to you, or
please.
I also didn't want, just to see where we're coming from here. But
what level of common knowledge we have.
Right.
No, I get it. I have friends who are composers and who work in, the music industry, and I am fascinated by it because it feels like how in depth I get with comedy and different techniques.
Right.
So it's like, it's fascinating to me. I can't do it with my own body and singing vocal cords, but I am very impressed by people who do understand this.
Right. So what I was getting at, and you understand what I'm getting at here, is in these spaghetti westerns, a lot of times the music represented trouble. There's trouble on the horizon in the films.
Right.
And this music that you heard, like the song Sampled and Crazy, that used a lot of minor chords, which created an ominous feeling behind the whole thing. And
that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in these, these sort of scores that had these very minor feels, they would have an occasional major tonality, which represented a form of heroism in the movie. So out of nowhere, you'd get these major chords mixed in, and it made you, whether you knew why you were feeling the things you felt, it made you feel something,
100%.
Yeah.
And I remember when this song came out, it was like, what is this? Like, what, like, when did we bring funk back on top of like all this other stuff? It was so different at the time. And then I remember not long after that, the YouTube graphic, I think that it was just the lyrics. It was just a full video of just like the lyrics, and that was cool. And their music video. But I remember being obsessed with this song when it first came out.
That's what I was going to ask you next is, did you choose this song because you were a fan of it?
Yeah, well, I was a fan of it, and it's also one of those things where, like, we know CeeLo, but we don't know, like, the band Gnarls Barkley as much because they weren't quite nearly as, like, commercially successful as, his next song that kind of blew him up. But trying to look at CeeLo's like history, and like I would go in and I found Gnarls Barkley, and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And Death has done things with so like Nora Jones and like all sorts of different artists, and like I ended up being like, I actually had no idea who the other person was in Gnarls Barkley.
Right.
Danger Mouse actually produced one of my absolute favorite albums, which is The Mouse and the Mask, and it's Danger Mouse providing all of the music and MF Doom rapping over all of it. But it was sponsored by Adult Swim, so every single song is about the original Adult Swim cartoons. But more importantly, the reason why I'm bringing that up, not just to shine a spotlight on it, it's actually where CeeLo Green and Danger Mouse first collaborated on something. And then that kind of led into them doing this Gnarls Barkley project after doing that album. Something that actually I thought was really cool while doing the research is that this, to them, was a pet project that they didn't think anyone would care about, so they completely funded it between the two of them. And according to Danger Mouse, they didn't have a formal record contract until the song had started to hit #1 in countries. Because this was just like them independently releasing this song and it blowing up, and then like Atlanta and Warner Brothers like suddenly wanted to sign them for the album.
They're like, yeah, because we want to use it in all of our trailers.
Why did they even need a record label at that point? What year is this?
2006, so it's right on that weird cusp
of stuff. Yeah, that not really digital. Yeah, it was around the start of YouTube too.
Yeah, an interesting question about that, Chris, is that when this became the #1 song in the UK, it was the first single to ever top the UK chart purely on its download stats. So that's like how early we were into the digital age of song downloading, even counting as like record sales.
Wow. So this was right on that cusp Where if it was a few years later, there's no way. Why would they sign to a record label? If you already have the number one song and you didn't need to give, a significant portion of the money away to a record label, why would you do it? It makes no sense. Record labels really are going by the wayside nowadays for the most part. There's still some standing strong, but I don't think that will be a thing in 20 years from now. Why would it need to be? I'm sure there will be other things, and you'll have more of a team around you, I think, of people that you hire to do specific things. That's a whole other conversation.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Hey guys, it's Matt, just interrupting the episode real fast to say, hey, do you like coffee? I know Chris and I do. So if you're a fan of coffee, how about you head over to rootlesscoffee.com, which you may remember is run by past guest Jono, and get yourself a bag of some coffee grinds. If you use the promo code OHT, all caps, 10, you will get 10% off your purchase, and a little bit of that money will come back to Chris and I. So it's a great way to help support the show and get a great cup of coffee. And now back to the episode.
I think that this song was just shoved down everybody's throat so hard.
There is that.
I wish that I could have heard it in a different context, have experienced it without it being thrown in my ears nonstop for, a decade and a half.
Sure.
I think that is, when I was listening to the song and analyzing it for today's show, I'm like, this is a damn good song.
It is.
It is.
What's funny is that when I wrote, when I was putting the lyrics into the document for us, if you were to just strictly look at the lyrics and not have any understanding of the song beyond just hearing it one time, it's really hard to place the lyrics to the melody. He sings the lyrics in a very strange cadence where sometimes he'll just, for a full bar, he might only sing 3 words, but then in that same amount of time will then immediately sing 15 words.
Yeah. And I think why that is, Matt, is because we said, he did this in one take supposedly. So he's going up there. And
that itself is crazy to me.
What I read was that not only was this done in one take, but it was the first time he ever sang the lyrics. He had written them down and just went into the studio and started singing them for the first time in the version that you're hearing.
What?
And
that's insane.
And I can speak from some experience about this.
Sure.
When you do that sort of thing, because I have experience of this in a couple ways. One is when I'm making demos and just sort of singing stream of consciousness type things, just to try and play around. Things I wouldn't do in front of anybody just because it's so ridiculous.
It's almost like a warm-up.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll stumble on something that if you are trying to write in a musical way, you're never going to, And a really good example of this is there's this band called The Vipers. that's a street punk band that I may or may not know something about. But all of the songs for this band, look up their album, Vipers, Spread the Poison. It's on all the streaming formats. But all the songs,
I love it.
All the songs were written in one night, basically, and on a voice memo. And the way that the melodies and lyrics were on the original voice memos from that night are the way that they stayed.
Oh.
Even when sometimes the melodies or words ran over too long on the line and stuff. No. And it's such a strange way. Another artist that comes to mind is The Streets. Mike Skinner does a lot of these strange melodies that if you're trying to be, I don't know if the right word is correct musically, it would never work.
Sure.
And I think that this all relates back to what Matt was saying about how if you were writing this, if you were reading this, you wouldn't know how this is going to fit to music.
It goes. Well, I mean, and I'm sure this is on like some karaoke bar or something like that. And then like, that's when you realize when you don't have CeeLo singing along with you, you're like, how does he do this? Like
the idea that he kind of went into his studio and just kind of, this was the very first time he's singing it. I think ironically, the part that makes the most sense that this is a single one take is the part that became a TikTok challenge last year, which is the Who Do You Think You Are challenge, where people would lip sync to who do you think you are? Ha ha ha, bless your soul, which absolutely feels like someone just in the booth and then realizing that they still have about 15 seconds left before the chorus kicks in.
Fair.
Hey, something I noticed about this song, I didn't read about it anywhere. I'm just looking at the lyrics and I noticed, and this is kind of a rare thing, especially for a radio hit, is that all three of the choruses in this song, the words are different. So the first verse is, does that make me crazy?
Right.
Possibly, and it ends with. The second one is, I think you're crazy, just like me. And the third one is, but maybe I'm crazy, maybe you're crazy, maybe we're crazy, probably. So it's the same melody, but to sing along to it, you had to have like really
switched it up all three times.
Yeah, you had to really do your research.
I never realized, but it's like, because, well, I mean, usually when you're hearing it, you're either hearing it on a trailer or just a TikTok challenge or something like that. But yeah, no, in the radio, you really had to remember, oh, yeah, this verse is different than the other chorus.
Not easy to sing along to is my point. But, which is rare for such a popular song. I mean, I feel like this had to be Matt sent me notes about it, but this had to be one of the most popular songs that year.
Oh, I would imagine.
It's insane that it was much bigger in the UK than it was in the States. It was still massive in the States. It never reached number one in the United States. It reached number one in the UK, and it actually was the number one song in the UK. It matched the length of the time that Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody was the number one song in the UK. Like, that's the longevity that the song had there. It peaked out at number 2. It couldn't get past Promiscuous by Nelly Furtado, was like locking down that number one spot. But this song sounds nothing like, let me read off some of the other songs that were on the charts. This song sounds nothing like what else was happening on the radio.
Right.
You had Me and You by Casey, Hips Don't Lie by Shakira, Snap Your Fingers by Little John, Riding by Chamillionaire, and Over My Head Cable Car by The Fray. Like, this was all over the place. Like, it was, every time I look at the lyrics and I think about parts of this, even think about, the song the first verse is like, starts with I remember when I lost my mind, which you would think, then you get into verse 2, and verse 2 starts off with, I hope that you're having the time of your life. Like, it is a completely different melody than the first verse by the time you get to just the second verse.
I mean, it just must have really pushed the buttons of like, it's a great beat, and you have CeeLo with a cool, interesting voice singing over it. He's hitting there's soul in his voice. So
which is that's something that we were really hearing at the time. Like, with this specific type of sampling, I didn't know it was from a spaghetti western, but like, that's so interesting and fascinating because I just thought it was just a funk beat. Like, that's all I thought it was. And like, we hadn't really heard funk in a lot of years unless you went to a jazz concert.
Right. That's pretty crazy. And
crazy.
I gotta be honest with the both of you though here.
You hate it.
No, I don't hate it. I think it's a good it's a good song.
I do agree with you that it has been played to death.
Well, yeah, it's been played to death. It was played so much that I never dug into the album. Today was the first time I ever put on the album, and I'm listening to it today, and this should so be up my alley. I like soul music. I like music that doesn't sound like other music. I like inventive beats and the sampling the spaghetti western. That's so awesome. All these things. Yet I'm listening to this album today and I'm like, I don't like this. And I don't know why. I almost feel guilty about not liking it because I like things that are different. And it does sound different. It's just not that good. And I think that might be why this Gnarls Barkley thing was a one-hit wonder. Is this particular song hit, even though it shouldn't have, for all these reasons we're talking about. It was stream of consciousness style, one-take recording. All the choruses are different. A lot of like the typical songwriting, like what makes a hit song style of songwriting is not happening here. And it's also not happening on the rest of the album, probably because, to your point, Matt, they made this thinking it wasn't going to be a successful thing, and then this song took off, which might explain like why more thought wasn't put into the rest of it. But
that makes sense.
If either of you have a counterpoint like, yo, I like this album a lot, I would love to hear it.
So I do like the album. I actually bought the album because I liked the second single a lot as well, which was a cover of the Violent Femmes' Gone Baby Gone. But I can answer all of your questions with a direct quote from Danger Mouse, because for whatever reason there was a ton of speculation on what their name meant, which to me just seems like a very clear pun on Charles Barkley. But he said, just like everything else on our album, there was no conscious decisions being made about our name.
So.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, and honestly, I haven't even heard the rest of the album. I looked it up and I was like, oh, I should probably listen to this at least for this episode. But then I lost time. I think I agree in that, like, there was something magical about that song that just hit everybody in the right spot at the right time. And then everything else was like, okay.
But I think I could also make the argument that, like, to go back to the quote about there was no conscious decisions being made about anything. Like, I think that's why the album is not that great, but I think it's also why this song is so good. Like, that there wasn't...
Because it stands out so hard.
Well, it's just that, in general, I think that sometimes people can overproduce themselves because they're putting so much of a conscious decision on it, where it's like, you know, if you just start throwing shit at the wall and just following your creative drive, you might find something amazing in that.
Stumble upon them.
Yeah, but it might be surrounded by a bunch of garbage.
That's they needed to have some more thought put into some of these songs. I think that's my impression. Granted, and I've said this a lot of times before, some of my favorite bands and artists, the first time I listened to their album, I didn't like it at all. You know, there's so many examples of this. The first time I heard Counting Crows, August, and everything after, I thought it was the worst thing I ever heard. Now I think it's the greatest album of all time. The first time I heard Jimmy Eat World, I hated it. When I heard when I heard Clarity for the first time, I was like, oh, this is so slow and boring. And now I think it's one of the best albums of all time. I hated The Streets the first time I heard him. Like, so many things that I love, I hated the first time. I also don't know, like, so it seems like these guys... Well, we know that Danger Mouse was busy collaborating with literally everybody, and CeeLo was just one of them, and they hit it off or whatever. But maybe both of these guys, I don't know, at the time, CeeLo was a prominent member of the Goody Mob, but I think the Goody Mob was already... Was that still...
He had already left.
Yeah.
He had left the group to do solo stuff. All things considered, even though they were both respected in their fields, this was definitely the biggest exposure for both of them at that time. And I think CeeLo Green had his big solo single that like really propelled him further, and then you know, terrible downfall. But like, you know, Fuck You was like the next crazy, where it was like the unescapable song for a summer. Danger Mouse definitely, like, I think prior to this, the most notable thing he had done really was the Grey album, where he did the Beatles mixed with Jay-Z, and that got like a lot of publicity at the time. But this was like both of their giant mainstream successes for themselves.
Gotcha. And CeeLo is an example, Matt. Like, who do we talk about that was also a one-hit wonder? Lamal Kajagoogoo, who had a hit, was a one-hit wonder with a band, and then was a one-hit wonder as a solo artist, because CeeLo didn't have any other songs.
CeeLo Green also infamously appeared in the movie Mystery Men.
Wait, what?
In the movie Mystery Men, there's a point where they bring in all of the different gangs, and he's going through all the different gangs, and he's like, the so-and-so mob, the blah-blah-blah mob, and he goes, the Goody Mob, and it's CeeLo Green and the rest of Goody Mob just sitting at the table.
How did oh my, I can see that scene in my head right now, and I'm blown away because I did not realize that was CeeLo.
Yeah. And CeeLo also, insane. When he was on was it The Voice he was a
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say he was probably one of the judges or something. So that probably got him back into this vernacular.
Right. And also, I don't know, we're not unaware of the fact that CeeLo had some salacious accusations.
Yeah.
People can do their own
Yes.
research on that. I believe that he was found guilty of a lesser charge than he was originally.
He hasn't really had much since then, I don't think. I think we kind of have moved on from... They're apparently still working on the third Gnarls Barkley album, so like who knows, maybe he'll make some giant return.
Maybe they'll put some thought into this one.
But anyway, this is the part of the show where we decide, was Gnarls Barkley a one-hit blunder, or did they bring the one-hit thunder? And this is a tough one.
I think they brought the thunder, man.
All right.
I'm putting it on. Look, in terms of the follow-up, absolutely not. That's a blunder. But like they hit it for once, and that was it. You know, the flash in the pan is now over.
Right.
I'm going to go Thunder 2 on this because I do think that there are some interesting elements of Saint Elsewhere. I mean, this is definitely the standout track from that album. But even like as I'm looking at what else was hitting the charts, like the biggest singles of that year were Danny Powder's Bad Day and Sexy Back by Justin Timberlake.
Danny Powder. I love how you're on a nickname basis with Daniel Powder. Danny Powder.
Danny Powder. We'll get to him one day on the show. But like I think that just having something this weird, and like, you know, we're saying that Saint Elsewhere was like a whatever album. But again, I think that we also have to keep in mind that this was just two buddies collaborating and accidentally had a hit versus like them trying. So I feel like if you're just like hanging with your buddy recording some stuff and you record this song, I got to give some thunder to that.
Well, to that exact point, Matt, I would say if you're two buddies hanging out and you accidentally make a hit song, that, you know, that's kind of a one-hit blunder. Like that's kind of the definition of like you blundered your way right into a hit song, but didn't have any other good songs. I think
it's more of a meandering, but
they hung out. They were This would be like so. In 2009, Rolling Stone named this the song of the decade, right? So I'm just saying, this is like if you and I were hanging out one weekend and just randomly decided, let's record a podcast about whatever, and we just spent a weekend just recording shit that we thought would only be funny for ourselves, and then it got named the podcast of the decade.
Rolling Stone names One Hit Thunder the podcast of the decade. Thanks, Rolling Stone.
You know what I mean? I'd be like, you know what? I don't care if people listen to our show and they're like, man, for a show that's lasted 100 episodes, only 3 of them are good. I'd be like, well, fucking who cares? Because Rolling Stone thinks that we're great.
I don't think Rolling Stone's the end-all, be-all of anything.
Of judgment.
So, I don't know. Gnarls Barkley to me is a one-hit blunder, but I see both of your point about it being one-hit thunder. It's 2-1. It's thunder.
Okay. I guess I was more thinking of like the song. The song specifically was the thunder.
Sure.
The band, Gnarls Barkley itself, was definitely a blunder. Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, deciding if it's thunder or blunder, that's however you want to make it. I go the whole way, the whole encompassing band or whatever.
The whole view of it. Okay. No, that makes sense.
The song is thunderous. I'll give the song thunder, but anyway. Katie, I hope you had fun on the pod today.
I did.
Thanks for coming on.
Do you have anything you need to promote real quick?
Every once in a while on the Geekscape Games podcast when I have the time. And I'm also on the Geekscape flagship show. You can always find me at Elsasser on all things. I just had a sketch come out for G4, which was a lot of fun. Cops in G4. Yay. And that's pretty much what I got in the pan.
Nice. It's nice to finally talk to you, Katie. I listen to you and see you on Geekscape all the time, and now
I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, okay.
I really do.
been One Hit Thunder. One Hit Thunder is hosted by Chris Fafalios of the bands Punchline, Pack, and Another Cheetah, and produced by Matt Kelly of Geekscape.net. Underneath me, you're hearing the Punchline cover of Christmas, Baby Please Come Home, off the Punk Rock Christmas Volume 2 comp. Visit punchline.com for info on future Punchline shows, releases, and merchandise. Punchline will be playing with Piebald in Lancaster on December 15th at Tell Us 360. If you see Chris or myself there, say hi. Do you want to hear your song on our show or have any interest in sponsoring an episode? Contact me at matt@geekscape.net for our rates. If you have any interest in podcasting, visit weknowpodcasting.com for how Matt and Chris can make your show sound as professional as possible. Let us know your thoughts on the show by emailing us at onehitthunderpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. And tune in next week for another episode of One Hit Thunder.
They're singing Deck the Halls, but it's not like Christmas at all. 'Cause I remember when you were here and all the fun we had last year. If there was a way, I'd hold back this tear, but it's Christmas Day.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.